Okay, so today we're looking at target 4, operations with functions. Remember, operations really just means add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So we're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing functions. There's some notation that you need to understand here. Like in A, for example, this says f plus g of negative 2. And really what this is saying is to find f of negative 2, to find g of negative 2, and to add them together. So if I find f of negative 2, that'll give me 12 plus 4, that's 16. G of negative 2 is negative 2 squared plus 5 times negative 2. So that's 4 plus a negative 10, which is a negative 6. And then if I add those together, I get 10 as my final answer. In B, they're telling me to add the two functions together. So I could rewrite this as f of x plus g of x. So I'm just adding the functions together. So if I do negative 6x plus 4 plus x squared plus 5x, I'm going to write it in standard form. So that's biggest exponent to smallest. So I've got x squared. When I combine these two x terms, I've got a negative x and then plus 4. All right, C is telling us to subtract the two functions. So if I wanted to, I could rewrite this as f of x minus g of x. Okay, so I'm going to do negative 6x plus 4, and then minus, and I'm going to put g of x in parentheses. So to subtract these, I need to distribute this negative to both terms and then combine like terms. So I've got negative 6x plus 4, and then minus x squared and minus 5x. If I rewrite that in standard form with biggest exponent to smallest and combine like terms, this will be my answer. For D, I am multiplying the two functions together. So I'm going to do negative 6x plus 4 times x squared plus 5x. So remember, when we're multiplying these, I call it double distributing. You might have heard your algebra teacher call it FOILing, which stands for first terms, outer terms, inner terms, last terms. So if we double distribute here, it's going to give us negative 6x to the third. Here I'm going to get negative 30x squared. And then if I distribute the 4, I'll get plus 4x squared and plus 20x. So then my final answer is negative 6x to the third minus 26x squared and then plus 20x. Okay. Now we're going to look at evaluating functions from a table. So notice that I have 3 columns here. I have my x values here, and then f of x, and then g of x here in the last column. So if I'm finding f of 1, I'm looking at an x value of 1, because remember, usually x goes here. So at an x value of 1, what's the value of the f function? And that answer will be 2. Okay. So take a second to find g of x. I'm sorry, find g of 1. So g of 1, I'm going to find an x value of 1 in my table, but now I need to go to this last column. So g of 1 is negative 2. In part C, I'm going to add the functions together at an x value of 1. So again, I can think of this as f of 1 plus g of 1. Okay. In the previous problem, I already found out f of 1 was 2, and g of 1 was negative 2. And if I add those together, I get 0 as my final answer. why don't you go ahead and try D and E, and then we'll check back in here in just a minute. All right, let's check in on D. Here I'm dividing the functions at an x value of 3. So again, if you want to rewrite this as f of 3 divided by g of 3, you could rewrite it like that. So I'm looking at an x value of 3. F of 3 is 10. And then g of 3 is 2. When I divide those, I would get 5 as my final answer. For E, f times g of 0. So I'm looking at an x value of 0. F of 0 would be 1. G of 0 would be negative 4. And when I multiply those, I'd get negative 4. All right, last we're going to evaluate from a graph. So again, remember this number in parentheses is really the x value. So this is saying at an x value of 0, what's the y value on the f function? Notice we have these labeled. So this v shape, or the absolute value, is f of x, and then the line is g of x. So if I'm finding f of 0, anything along here has an x value of 0. It intersects that f function right here, and that y value is 2. So find g of 3, and then let's check back. All right, so I need to find an x value of 3. That happens along this vertical line here. I need to find where it intersects the g function, which is the linear one. And that happens right here. And that y value there would be 5. Okay, for C, I'm going to add the two functions at an x value of negative 1. So an x value of negative 1 happens right here. Okay. So f of negative 1 would be 3. And then g of negative 1 would be negative 3. And when I add those, I get 0. Go ahead and try D and E. All right, let's check in on D. So I'm subtracting these two functions at an x value of 0. So that x value of 0 happens here. So I need to find f of 0 first. That's 2. G of 0 is negative 1. And 2 minus a negative 1 would give me 3. For part E, I'm doing f g of 4. That means I'm multiplying the two functions at an x value of 4. That happens over here. So f of 4 would be 2. And g of 4 would be 7. When I multiply those, that gives me 14. So after watching this video, hopefully you feel comfortable evaluating and working with operations with functions, whether we give you expressions or tables or graphs.